Connection. There we go. There we have it. Let's go live. And three, two, one. Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. How's everyone doing? Welcome to Weather Center Live. Woo, it's been a very busy week. It has been a very busy week. That's why we haven't been on the channel very much, unfortunately. I do apologize for that. It seems like I've been away, but I've still been actively making content for the TikTok and my Instagram. Been looking at all that. It's a little more low threat to pump out as opposed to YouTube videos and whatnot. I've been kind of planning behind the scenes for what I else want to do with this YouTube channel moving forward, to include what I put in my community post yesterday about maybe starting a one-off podcast that we would do maybe bi-weekly or once every other week, something along those lines, something to get us away from the model data, get away from the charts, get away from the debates, the rigmarole of the actual weather sphere, and just sit back and talk and do a narration or a discussion on several different, whether it be current events, historical events, educational topics, or even just how goes it weather wisdom. And it actually was very well received. I do appreciate that, guys. I'm going to work on trying to maybe put that together for sometime late March, early April. We will see. But tonight we have a couple of big main events to talk about. First and foremost, as you can see here on my screen, this is going to be day 6 of 8 on Storm Prediction Center. Excuse me, this is actually day 7. This is day 6 of Storm Prediction Center's highlights, and then day 7, a full week away, they have highlighted us for a 15% threshold of possible severe weather in an area that we're not too familiar with. We've been very heavily fixated along the Gulf coastline, the Dixie Alley area, the Southern Plains, and especially for us here in the Southeast, whether it be Florida, Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas. And as I've mentioned in previous TikTok updates, if you follow me on there, I'd mentioned we're going to have to start getting used to seeing things popping up way into the Midwest, up into the Great Lakes area as we get into spring. And you know, telltale sign that spring is definitely on the horizon. It was wonderful to get off work tonight and actually still see a little bit of the sun up. It's very nice. It gives me a little bit more hope, you know, instead of starting the day, beautiful sunshine, and then getting off and, well, dark. Time to end the day. You know, it gives me that little bit of a second wind to get things done, get on here and talk to all you lovely people. Which, by the way, speaking of lovely people, I got to give some big shout-outs tonight. Extreme shout-outs, as a matter of fact. Silver Steel S. I am also from Central Florida. Found you a few nights ago, and I love what you are doing. Silver Steel, thank you graciously for the $10 donation. Very lovely to have you a part of the weather community. That's exactly what we're doing here, is we're building a community together. We support one another. We have great conversation here in the live stream. So for those of you who may be new and joining in, please don't be disturbed or upset or get a little impatient if we talk a little bit more than we actually forecast. The forecasting and the analysis is delved into a bit, but with these live streams, it's my opportunity to connect with you guys more than anything and just have a conversation while talking science, talking current events, other things going on in the weather sphere. So Silver Steel S, genuinely appreciate you. And then Joseph Parton with a $20 donation. I've learned a lot from this channel. Thank you very much. That means a tremendous amount to me, Joseph. It means even more to me as I continue my education, not only in civilian weather, but eventually military weather. Well, I don't say eventually. I am in military weather. This weekend, hopefully, guys, I'll have some more information on whether or not I can take you along for a specialty weather course before the end of the year. It is my first drill weekend with the Navy Reserves. They're going to spin me up on what my weather position is going to look like and what the upcoming special training that I'll need to be getting, or I should be receiving, so I can eventually make more rank, make more money, promote, and eventually commission once I do get my meteorology degree. So that is slowly but surely getting in motion. So we'll see exactly what comes out of this weekend, and I'll definitely be sure to keep you guys updated on that as well. Very excited to see if I can pump out some unique content, maybe from elsewhere, not in the state of Florida, but traveling on military orders. So we'll see. I'll definitely bring you guys along as best as I can. Let's say hello to a few folks. Amanda Kirby, hello there. PM2 mods from the great state of Florida. I agree. I love both you guys for sure. I like Infinity so much. Mr. Snow Gaming. What do you mean by the wind's going to look like and where? Where are you looking at specifically? Let's see. Zenful, hello there, dear. Welcome in. Mr. Storm, do you think we will have an outbreak? It's going to be a close call. We will see exactly what takes shape. We'll take a look at a few of the parameters today and tonight for certain. We're going to talk all about that. A305 Aaron, A305 Aaron, 1234. Good evening. One question: is it possible that Southeast Virginia could see some severe weather? We will see. We're going to talk about that. It definitely looks like this is going to be a very expansive event for sure. It's just switching an area. It's switching areas. We're very used to seeing it down here during the winter time, all thanks to El Nino. And as we come out of winter, we're going to start seeing it become a lot more elongated like so. This is exactly what's going to start happening. We might see some boiling over with future storms. I'm not saying right now, but this is looking down the road, down the pipe, as some will say, with future storm events. We could possibly see it bleed a little bit further to the east and see a return of our severe weather conditions for the southeast, especially with El Nino still kicking it until probably April or May. We'll finally start to see that subtropical influence going away. So that's day 6. This is day 7. We're looking at a possible severe weather issuance for the Midwest, looking all the way through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, looking at Kentucky, maybe the extreme westernmost periphery of Virginia. We will see. It looks like we're coming down into Louisiana and the Gulf Coast states once again. We're going to get into that. It does look like Cape is going to surge far to the north, looking a little bit more conditionally unstable than we've seen for a while now, because we're actually going to have our subtropical ridge moving all the way up towards where we had previously been forecasting a lot of snowfall for the last several months. That has completely changed rhythm, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. Let's go back to our earlier forecasts, because as you can see, we actually did have a marginal risk for severe out there. This is issued for tomorrow. I should say kind of going live now as of 0Z, the 23rd. I know it's still the 22nd calendar, but with the universal time conversion, this would equate to 23 February 0Z, or 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for us currently. Well, not literally currently, but you guys know what I mean. And then on day 2, we have a little bit of a continuation of that over the Carolinas and a thunderstorm risk for the rest of us here in the southeast as this weak frontal boundary comes through. Not really thinking we're going to see a whole lot out of it. We will see. It's not a very strong or robust system. And as such, we'll take a look at what we got going on out there. So this is the system that's expected to push through and give us a little bit of potential activity. And as I've mentioned, I'm not really expecting a whole lot with it, because if you look, this is our jet max right here, and it gets washed out pretty badly with all this extra jet energy we have moving through. Let me adjust the chart so you guys can see it a little bit better. There we go. And we have weak finger of the jet here. I have a weak finger of the jet here. Stronger finger of the jet here. We have a lot of diffuse energy out there, and that's why these systems are not really packing too heavy of a punch. So that first area is going to work its way through, kind of getting supplemented with our polar front jet up in through here. And as that continues to move off to the east, we're going to have a brief period, where we're going to end up having zonal flow over the CONUS, but with a somewhat meridional pattern across North America and a large majority of the North Central Pacific and the North Central Atlantic. You can see a bit of a ridge building here, a ridge definitely building out over the Atlantic waters, a trough here and a trough here, but then we're primarily west to east across the country, and that's going to kind of help to prime this next system. This is the big tamale, so to speak. As you take it through time, you can see that trough very quickly goes negatively tilted. We have a really good interaction between our low-level or our low-latitude subtropical jet, and then this is our polar front jet going negatively tilted as it makes its way through the Midwest and the Great Lakes. Very, very good, abundant difluent flow out ahead of it, and I mean a lot of it, too. If I switch colors here and go to yellow, you can see this entire area is difluent flow, which is why we're thinking we could see some pretty widespread severe conditions. Maybe not an entire outbreak, but the environment is definitely priming itself, because if you think about it and you look at the jets as a delineation or a separation of our air masses, which is really what they help us to identify, to the north of this is going to be all of our polar air. I'll draw a giant P up there. This is our subtropical jet. So if you think about it, our subtropical air is down here, and as these two collide like so, there could be a whole slew of very aggressive thunderstorms and rainfall, convective activity right along the leading edge of that area of conflict, as we've used to describe it in previous videos. And then looks like the Euro is thinking we could have an even stronger system, I've noticed, coming across the south. This could, like I said, guys, kind of make it a situation to where we see some severe weather to the north, but it also bleeds through the south as well. So spring/ March could come in on a very, very powerful note. We'll have to see if this trends, because this is definitely looking a little bit more impressive than what's moving through right now. We're having a collision of the two different air masses, the two different areas of jet energy, almost equal in strength for that matter at 300 millibars. Subtropical jet, polar front jet max looking about the same. And look at all this diffluent flow over the central and southern plains already starting to take shape. So I would not be surprised if we start to get on a more recurring, basis or a more recurring rhythm of seeing more severe weather forecasted on our days 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 SPC charts. We'll come on down to the good old surface. Here's our first system. Honestly, really not a whole lot with it. I'm surprised they even went with a level 1 risk for the Carolinas, because if you look at the latest European model, this is our 12Z model. Euro doesn't really even give it a whole vote of confidence. We're going to keep a closed low with this. We lose the low pressure center. It looks like it's somewhere right up and through here. Very weak warm sector, very weak cold front draped down to the south. Just some very raggedy looking shower activity with it. But we do still get some instability and some buoyancy provided by our Western Atlantic high pressure here that's helping to churn the waters, churn the air down over the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles. So that's going to create just a little bit of air mass discontinuity right in through there, so we could possibly see maybe some localized stronger storms. Nothing really significant, but of course we also have our El Nino jet helping to provide that shear component, a little bit of extra oomph to these storms, give it that little nudge, as I like to say. So, anything is out of the, nothing is out of the question. Not anything is out of the question. Yes, nothing's going to happen. Which, hold on to that statement. Nothing is out of the question. And I'm going to leave you in suspense. That's all I'm going to say. So, as we go through time, you can see our next storm system comes across the northern tier, moving across the Canadian provinces, and that's going to help to bring down a little bit of that cold air. This first clipper system up and through here is going to drag some polar high pressure down to the south. And as we get that trough to move its way in, some shortwave vorticity at 500 millibars is going to help to produce some cyclogenesis over the upper four corners area. And as that emerges out over the lower terrain, you can see that really deepening down right there. We already have our surface low right in through here. The model resolution does a very poor job of highlighting the center of circulation. There's a low here. There's some lowering pressure here, right in through here. This is the model resolution that we've discussed in previous videos, guys, when we were talking tropics last year, and this is exactly what's going to end up happening with this setup here. And, I haven't really been paying attention to the weather sphere, but I would not be surprised if everyone fixates on the snow with this. We got to get the snow out of our systems, especially as we get through March and meteorological spring and eventually the real spring hits. But we are looking at some pretty good wintry conditions on the backside of this system because of this polar high pressure that's situated up over, what is that, Alberta or Manitoba? Well, I think that's Manitoba. This is Saskatchewan, situated up over the Manitoba area. So as this area comes down, notice we have a wide open gulf. Notice that we have our Alberta Clipper system up over James Hudson Bay. That's kind of the other key here. So if you look through here, we have high pressure over Bermuda. And if I were to draw a line, I know this is off the chart, guys, but if you follow it like so, we have the south side of that high pressure dragging in all of our good warmer equatorial tropical air from the Caribbean. They got a lot of moisture going on down there, which again, going back to what I'd mentioned in my sinister little hint, just putting it out there. We have a lot of moisture popping up in the Caribbean, popping up in the tropics, which is, but anyways. So what that's doing is providing us with that springtime setup. As this high pressure situates itself aloft, we have our subtropical jet ridging way up to the north. We're getting a really nice subtropical ridge coming across the eastern seaboard all the way up into Quebec of Canada. You can see it at the 300 millibar level, and you can see it in the thickness if we were to switch over to that here in a moment. And so what ends up happening here, if I go just a little bit further in time, notice how we get a lot of that air mass type thunderstorms. This is exactly what I had mentioned before. If we went back in time, sometime during live streams in January earlier this month, I'd mentioned that we're going to switch from being able to track a very distinct squall line like we've seen with other winter storms to these air mass, these general thunderstorms propping up along the leading edge of these systems. And that's why I do think we have that blanket issuance of a 15% chance across the Midwest and then spanning further down into the Southeast as you move along, because all this area is going to run right headfirst into all that subtropical modifying air over the eastern half of the U.S. And if you notice, our front is still way back here. The front is still way back here, so it's not the squall line. This is all possible precursor thunderstorms that could be firing up and becoming discrete in nature, especially since we have our polar front jet aloft and then our subtropical jet aloft, helping to really shear these storms apart. So, yeah. Very, very interesting stuff. This could possibly be a very, very good, significant weather event. Could be a severe weather outbreak. We're definitely still far enough in advance to kind of see exactly how things unfold, and then I'll go very quickly through the loop. If you guys look out over the eastern half or the western half of the country, check this bad boy out. So not only do we have a whole slew of moisture over the eastern half of the U.S., of course, just in time for next weekend when I'm actually going to be available. It seems like every time I have to work, the weather is just glorious. Can anybody else out there relate to that? I feel like recently, anytime the weather has been phenomenal, I'm stuck in here working or doing something. And now next weekend, when I want to get out and do stuff, looks like there's going to be rain in the forecast. But check this out what the Euro's thinking. 984 millibar low sneaking its way out of the central and northern Rockies. So not going to touch on that too heavily. That's very, 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 very back end of this loop. This is March 3rd, and I know that the time is moving by very quickly, but we're not going to rush it for heaven's sake. So we'll have to watch this. This could be another very expansive severe weather threat if it unfolds. I believe our ensembles are also on track with hinting at this as well. So, we will see. This is a look at our Cape. So Cape is, popping up a little bit down there over Georgia, South Carolina, which is very interesting because that does not line up with where SPC has our severe risk highlighted. They have us highlighted here when it looks like a majority of our buoyancy and available energy on top of our shear and any kind of convective energy that we can get out of this synoptic scale feature is back off to the southwest of their designation. But I digress. And as we go even further through time, look at all this convective available energy that just blossoms, not only over the southern plains, but all the way up into the Midwest. And we're talking a widespread pocket of it, too. Not the most impressive values this far out, but still, nonetheless, that is definitely very, very indicative of springtime. And then take a look at how much Cape we have blooming up over the south and even Florida. Finally starting to see that winter cap finally break itself down, and we're going to start seeing our thunderstorm activity really begin to fire up over Florida. My natives here, or folks who've been in Florida for a while now, we know the sea breeze can bring us day-to-day severe weather. So we'll have to see, going through March, and I'm not saying early March, I'm just noticing that as our subtropical air coming up, we're going to start to see more of this very, very aggressive buoyancy kicking in. However, of course, just because we have the buoyancy doesn't mean we're going to get thunderstorms. It does not mean we're going to get severe weather, but that's a clue. That's a breadcrumb. And again, we're going to talk breadcrumbs at the end of this live stream because there's something that's been giving me the chills popping up, and it just has me going crazy mentally. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, I had popped out a story at almost 11 o'clock at night because, again, I was sitting there obsessing over this stuff, and I noticed something. I'll get into that in a little bit. I'll make a note of it, actually, off the side of the screen here so I can remember to circle back to that real fast. Let's see. So, sorry, forgive me. I'm typing right now. There we go. All right, I'm going to leave that up to the top there. So, of course, I'm not saying that this immediately means severe weather for us down here in the southeast, but what I'm saying is that the models are definitely indicating that we're already starting to see precursor signals that we will eventually be transitioning to a full-fledged springtime pattern, and with that comes the risk of garden variety daytime thunderstorms that tend to pop up over the south, over the southeast, and so on and so forth. And then you could see some early signals or some hints that we could have something popping up over the northern plains, over the Midwest, once again with that next system. The GFS here does an outstanding job at all model runs of highlighting exactly what's going to take shape. And I like this outlook just a little bit more because you can really get a good idea of how strong the gradient is around this setup here. Here's all your cold air being funneled down to the south. Weakish polar high, though. Notice that. It's not a very strong polar high. And if you guys have been watching a number of my videos now, I've been mentioning that as we move out of winter, we're going to flip the script. We're not going to have to worry so much about the cold air. It's going to be a matter of the warm air on the leading edge of these systems. Because any amount of cold air that comes in is going to ignite all that instability. That's our trigger, the catalyst. And in this case, it's flip-flopping. During the winter time, it was more so how strong of cold air we could get to impact our modified air, because we naturally were a little chillier across the board. But now, if you look at these thickness values, we have very warm thicknesses going all the way up the column, all the way up through the Great Lakes, up into the Northeast. Our technical thickness line identifying where our main area of subtropical air is well across the south. And obviously, this is not going to be the telltale dead end where, whatchamacallit, that's where our warm air stops. The warm air is going to surge all the way up to where the second line is. And as a result, even if this is a weak-ish polar modified Arctic high, however you want to describe it, that's going to help to ignite, set this all off. Try to imagine all this warm air up and through here is going to be like nitroglycerin, and then this here is going to be a little bit of a violent shake to just set all that nitroglycerin off, and that's exactly all it's going to take. And if I go just a couple more panels into the stream or the forecast chart here, you can see blam, very, very nice, definitive, aggressive setup right in through here. And a very expansive one, too. You can see just how far north our warm advection goes, because look at what the 12Z GFS is thinking our snow line is going to be. There's going to be almost no snow for a large majority of the eastern half of the U.S. until we can get a little bit of that cold air to finally pull down with these strong triple point lows that are going to end up going on. That's another very interesting factor with this system, is we're expecting multiple rounds of triple point cyclogenesis with it as it comes across. So as you see here, we have our first unstable wave. It kind of drops back into the cold air, so we get additional low pressure systems right along that area of temperature discontinuity, the baroclinicity. And as it continues on, we have not one, then here comes the next one, there's another one, and then here comes the next one, there's another one right here. The model just hasn't stamped it yet. There's another weak little low-pressure vortice right in through there. Just a whole bunch of different low pressures firing along this area of temperature discontinuity. And then once again, you can see we have a very, very shallow trough. Very shallow trough, almost a marked change on either side of this, where our warm air is already surging back over the Rockies. Warm air stays really well in place out along the leading edge of this system. Look at how thinly packed the thickness lines are. We have our 564 line here, and then we have our 548 line right here. Not 548, excuse me, a 558 line all the way up here. That's almost half of the United States East Coast. And essentially what this is showing you guys is we have a very, very shallow gradient, which means that our subtropical air or our modified warm air is very, very stretched out. It's pushed way to the north. That's why that rain-snow line exists all the way up into eastern Quebec, getting into New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, whereas just like the previous winter system, we had positioned more or less in kind of the same area, and we had snow all across its north and northwestern edge of it. Now that warm sector is crazy elongated and stretched out. And you see the GFS is also kind of pointing towards that next system that the Euro was thinking could possibly form up out west. However, it takes a much more northward track of it and keeps our cold air really at bay. And you can see the entire United States is in for a spring pattern for the most part. If you go back just a couple patterns, here you go. This is spring, just hitting everybody right upside the head. You can see that we have our cold thicknesses parked right up along the coastline, and then there's our freezing line almost outside of the U.S. entirely, minus the upper periphery of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and then maybe the upper periphery of Maine. What is that, New Hampshire? Kind of scraping New York State just a little bit. So that's definitely spring. I'm not saying that's the arrival of spring and it officially be spring, but that spring kind of just giving us a little taste. If you look at the anomaly, look at that. Warm air everywhere. Cooler temps down over the south, and by this, it just means it's cooler than the norm. That doesn't mean that it's going to be cold down over the south. If I switch over to our actual temperature, you can see just warm everywhere. This is overnight. Let me go to the daytime. There you go. You go to the daytime, and you can see all those very modest spring-like temperatures for the daytime highs are going to be pretty spread out everywhere. Our freezing temps are all the way up here. Everything else is looking fairly mild. And again, we have to take into account these frontal boundaries that are going to be coming through. And as I said, they're not going to have a whole lot of cold air with them. So that's why, even though it does seem fairly chilly, 60s and 50s and 40s, this is technically quite warm in consideration to what we've been through for the last several months. So spring is coming. It's not here yet, but the early spring that good old Phil predicted does seem to start unfolding, does seem to be unfolding, kind of coming together, piecing itself together slowly but surely. I mean, look down in Florida. Look at these high temperatures on Saturday, the 2nd of March. We're definitely getting up there. Arizona, Tucson, where I was stationed previously, is starting to finally get up there as well. Starting to see the desert mild temps coming back. And look at the plains. Look at the temperatures across the plains in the Dixie Alley area. We've got very, very mild temps extending all the way up to South Dakota, parts of, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, starting to finally get into the upper tier U.S., with our Rocky Mountains being the only areas that are still kind of below freezing. But granted, that's 5, 6, 7,000 feet up in the air, obviously. So we're getting there. We're definitely starting to get there. Those are going to be the main areas we want to watch. If I switch on over to our ensemble members, you can see the same thing as well. We'll come on over to our under 1,000 millibars, and we'll take a look at what the Euro probabilities are thinking. Let me go back to 12Z so we can go all the way out in time. So there's the next one right there. Euro is 100% on board at this case, pretty much, that we're going to have a pretty gnarly storm system moving through the upper Midwest, the Great Plains, or the Northern Plains anyways. And then finally, you go a little bit further than that, and you can see that the Euro is not as sold on the next system. Even though the operational model is showing a massive system, these are our ensemble probabilities, which is a wonderful tool. Again, big shout. I'm not sponsored by them. I wish I was. But a big shout out to weathermodels.com. They've really stepped up their products. They're definitely stepping up their products for sure. They've got a lot of other wonderful tools, or a whole new realm of wonderful tools on their website. And if you guys remember, if you've been longtime viewers of my channel, we used to use a lot of the probabilities and ensembles for the tropical season. And in this case, we now have some good old probability charts for the United States as well as we go through spring and the severe weather season. So you can see the Euro is not entirely sold on this next system. It's getting there. We're about 50% of the way there that we could have a sub-1,000 millibar low moving across the Midwest once again. And notice, guys, the general trend here is definitely very, very spring-ish. They've been coming at us all winter time like this, in this fashion, has been the spring pattern. The steering flow of El Nino subtropical jet activity and the polar front jet troughing in across the west coast and moving across the southern tier. Notice how all of these low tracks now, as the preliminary area of spring starts to come in, they're moving more like this. So that's a telltale clue that our polar front jet is rising up. And when I say rising up, I mean just lifting into the northern latitudes again. And another clear disclaimer as well is, with the sun staying up longer, we're going to have more daytime heating. And believe it or not, that also is what really influences spring. It's the natural tilt of the Earth and its rotation around the sun, its orbit around the sun as well. That's also what contributes to lifting some of these colder regions, these colder semi-permanent pressure systems and the colder jets and all that temperature discontinuity to the north. So as we start getting a lot more time under the sun throughout the day, that's also what's going to start to kind of get rid of winter time, keep the cold air at bay. See what I did there? Bars. Just playing. I had to sneak that in there. So definitely something worth watching. Definitely very interesting that we're going to have two potentially back-to-back systems. We'll definitely have to keep a close eye on the first one. That's a little bit more nearer in time. We're getting close to the 4 to 5 day mark where you can see that system march its way out of the northern Rockies and across the south. And then, yeah, all hell could possibly break loose along its leading edge. So I would give it about a 60% shot right now that we're definitely going to see some pretty good highlighted areas of severe weather. The big picture synoptic pattern is in place. We have a lot of really good subtropical air beginning to work its way up, and I'll even show you a little bit closer. We'll go back to the Euro, we'll look at United States, and we'll use our 500 millibar geopotential heights. And before that system comes through right here, notice how our cold thicknesses are only so far to the south, but then look at how far to the north our warm thicknesses are. If I could rewind, guys, I wish I could rewind, unfortunately. I can't. We can't go that far back in time with these models, but if you guys recall on previous updates, I'd shown you guys this 570 line being down here. I'd mentioned on several different videos You know, look at the 570 line over the Gulf Coast. Now, look at how far to the north the 570 line is. Look at where our polar line is. So, again, we're seeing some really marked shifts north. So, the snow could possibly only be around for another month. Give it, of course, obviously, very upper tier U.S. will probably still see a little bit of that freezing air come down. We're talking Pac Northwest, Idaho, Montana, North, South Dakota. We're talking very, very upper, northern tier U.S. states. I don't really think we're going to see a whole lot of, very intense snowstorms or historic blizzards, as we've mentioned in the past, down through the South or the Mid-Atlantic. I hate to say it, but unless we have something very, very, very nasty coming on the horizon, we might not get any snow. This might be just a dead winter for us in the Mid-Atlantic, parts of Tennessee, the Carolinas, places who have been wanting snow, who were told that snow was going to come because everyone loves to hype up, and nothing happened. We'll have to watch this, of course. We'll definitely have to take a look at this. But even then, this does look very menacing, but this is our freezing line. So we don't have a lot of cold air with this either. Don't let this misconstrue you or confuse you. What I'm looking at, once again, is our warm air out ahead of it, really coming up all across the northeast coast. You can see just how hot it is, for sure. You can see how hot it is all through the south, the east, and all the way up into the northeast. There's our subtropical jet, folks, going all the way up to Nova Scotia, Quebec, probably scraping over southeastern Ontario at this point. And notice, if you remember the rule of thumb, 522 is usually where you'll find the main area of our polar front jet energy. And take a look at this. 522 line is almost not even on the chart. You could argue the 528 line is a bit more polar as well, but even then, look at where our polar lines, our little areas of, our markers, if you will, at the thickness and the height level. Polar air is way up there. So, we're definitely, we're losing it. We're losing the cold. You're very, honestly, Kevin, it could be one of the last definitive ones. We're going to get, cool. We'll probably see more cool fronts. I'm calling them cool fronts. Obviously, the terminology is cold front. So if I say cold front, you know what I mean. But I say cool front because they're going to come through. We're going to get literally like a cold snap. One day, 40 degrees, and then the next day back to 70. We're getting to that point in time where here in Florida, we're going to have cold air for 12 hours. And then by the time the cold air mixes out, return flow is already in business. So for a true, genuine, a whole week of 30s, 40s, and then maybe upper 50s and 60s in the afternoon, I think we're very quickly exiting that time period. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll see exactly what happens here. The Euro is currently the only one showing as definitive of a deep digging trough. If you guys noticed on the GFS here, it didn't really look all that impressive. This is about the same time frame right now, as a matter of fact. And if you look, the warm temps pretty much stick all the way around. Even with this cold plunge that the model's thinking could happen 384 hours out, we know how that's verified. Definitely, almost ignore this. But even if, hypothetically, this scenario were to unfold, we're still only barely seeing, maybe trying to get into the freezing temps as our overnight lows. These are the low temps for Florida, the Gulf Coast. So even then, with an actual punch of cold air from up north, it's not very dense cold air. So winter's kind of fighting a losing battle. Which, now that we've reached the half an hour point in the chat, do I have any questions? Anybody out there? What type of storms will I see for Ontario? Well, Ontario as a whole is likely just going to be buffeted by a lot of snowfall. You might have some wintry icing mixed precip, that's for sure. If I come back over to this and we go to MSLP and the precip model here and you look, notice how Ontario gets a little bit of that leading cold or leading warm air, so the extreme southeast portion of the state could see rain. So I'm thinking southeast portion of the province could see a mixed precip event before that snow really builds in. But a large majority of you guys are just going to see snow with this next storm system. It's really going to be dependent on where our warm sector really establishes itself and how far to the north our setup can get. Because, look at this. If I just strip away all these colors, if you guys don't pay attention to the blue, the pinks, the greens, and you focus primarily on the isobars, the black lines, right out of the gate, you can see our two different air masses right here. You can see this is just a huge plume of warm air. This is our cooler air. And so it's really going to be determined heavily by where our warm sector, both at the surface and our upper fronts, can establish themselves. Carl McConnell, good question. Tornado threat for St. Louis, Missouri? I would think so. I would think there is a preliminary tornado threat. I'm only giving it a level 1 risk right now, just because obviously we're still too far in time to really get a handle on what our higher res models who do much better in these convective style scenarios could tell us. I think by Sunday we'll have a better idea of exactly what's going to be unfolding. Not only will our long range models start to finally dig into this meat and potatoes a little bit more, we'll get a better look at what the consistency levels across models and run to run looks like. Still some discontinuities out there, not a tremendous amount, but our models are catching up after the slew of issues we had with that cold pocket and that cutoff low that moved over the south and that first winter storm that looked like it was going to do jack nothing. I don't trust our long-range models very much with convective parameters. I really don't. I like them for synoptics. I like them for determining air masses, for jet placement, for shortwave placement, and even then it could be a little wishy-washy. But by Saturday, and if not, definitely Sunday, we'll have a better idea of what the tornado threat looks like. But don't be surprised. Do not be surprised if we have a nice isolated tornado threat for a large area. If you switch over to 250 millibars, this is exactly why. Wonderful shear component. Here's our subtropical jet all the way up into the Midwest. Here's our polar front jet, all the way up through the northern tier U.S., the upper Midwest, the northern plains, getting over the Great Lakes. So really great shear component, really good warm, buoyant component to it. Going to have some decent cape, that's for sure. So, I mean, all the ingredients are there. We just got to wait and see exactly what shakes out by the time we're within 48 to 72 hours. Yeah, Metallica, Alabama, we're going to switch over to that here in a second, and we'll start talking about it. And, you know, for my folks out there in the chat, we have about 71 viewers, so a little higher than normal. Thanks everybody for joining in. For those of you who didn't introduce, I'm still saying hello to you. Like, for example, Carl, great question. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Snow Gaming, Amanda Kirby, Metallica, Alabama. Hope all has been well with you as well. Thanks for joining in tonight. Very wonderful to see you. K-pop lover, welcome in. Everybody out there who hasn't introduced themselves or popped into the chat, big warm welcome to you. Good evening. I hope you've had a wonderful part of the majority of the week. Happy Friday Eve. We got one more day till the weekend. So yeah, this is what I'm going to turn everybody's attention to. And I've pissed people off. I've already pissed people off because I'm sharing my thoughts. So scroll through time and take a look at that. That's suspect. That's suspect. If you go back to 6Z, it looks even worse. Look at that. Go back to 0Z. Little something something forming along the frontal line. Still very suspect. You back to 12Z yesterday. Suspect. So, before we start blowing up my chat, before you guys start flaming me and mentioning that, you know, oh, you just lost all credibility. You're forecasting a tropical storm for March. No, guys. No. And I want to reiterate this for my folks out there who mention, even on my Instagram, when I pop this stuff up on there, just, you know, as a how goes it post, I'm not putting this out there to start saying we got to monitor, we got to watch, tropical formation, tropics are waking up, here we go. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I know we love to bag on the GFS. I know we love to talk smack about the GFS. A lot of even big names in the meteorological community, folks who've been doing it for much longer than a lot of us, if not everybody in this chat, love to say the GFS is out to lunch a lot of the time, especially when you get past the 200 and some odd hour mark and forward. But models are, they don't have a sense of humor. They don't play jokes. They're not funny. So why I bring this up and why I'm genuinely kind of feeling, even more concerned, something's in the atmospheric data, something's in the radiosonde data that we collect as we send our weather balloons up, as we collect the radiosondes and plug them into the supercomputers known as the Euro, the GFS, and all the different individual model members, something inside there, if you kind of imagine the data as the green blocks, the falling equations and numbers of the matrix, something in the matrix is saying that we have conditions favorable for tropical development in March. So that's why I'm not bringing this up to say, oh, shoot, time to start the hurricane season. No, but what I'm thinking is this could possibly be, as I mentioned in the beginning, breadcrumbs. Nothing could be nothing is impossible. And maybe what the GFS in its la-la land wisdom is telling us is we could have an early start to the season. And I'm not saying March, but I'm saying that if our models in some way, shape, or form are spitting out data that a solution shows tropical, if not subtropical development, that goes to tell you guys we might be on a whole other playing field. Because I personally have not been watching the models this closely until starting up my social media, starting up my YouTube channel. So I don't know. Maybe last year in 2022, we had rogue, or as I like to call them, phantom cyclones on the models at the same time every year. Who knows? I really can't testify to that. I haven't been watching. But I will admit, and I'd be lying to you guys if I said since the end of hurricane season up until now, I have not looked at the tropics at all. Not once. At all. Since November 31st, I have not touched tropics. Of course, naturally, because I was so used to doing it every day, every 5 minutes when providing you guys with the initial updates on this channel when I first got started. It's just naturally rhythm. I wake up in the morning, say good morning, and then immediately, what's going on out there? I look at North America and look out at the tropics, just, because it's a force of habit. And when I started seeing this, I'm like, okay, I know it's 4:30 in the morning and I'm 90% asleep, but what am I seeing? And, it's the GFS has been very persistent. I'm pretty sure if I go back to Monday time frame, we've had some stuff flaring up out there. We had this random spin along a leftover frontal system. We had something else trying to flare itself up in the Gulf of Mexico. Didn't really do much, and I can't remember what day it was. I can't remember if it was Sunday. There was another day where we had a full-fledged hurricane feature forecasted moving over Florida. Glendale, Railfan, French Toast. So what is the tornado chance for Tuesday? A little too early to say. There's definitely a chance. I'm not here saying that tornadoes are for sure going to happen or they're not going to happen. So I would say, again, if I were Storm Prediction Center this early in the forecast, I'd give you guys a level 1 risk for tornadoes, that 2%. Definitely prepare to see an occasional funnel or two based on the synoptics and the big picture pattern. Glendale and Iran. Is it good for tornadoes next week? Yes, I would definitely think that this is a favorable setup for tornadoes, that's for sure. How many, how robust, how much of a potential, we're still exploring, but I would definitely say green light on the tornado risk, the risk. So I would definitely say a watch will likely be issued, especially if this continues to hold true and we get even more robust warm air advection forming along the leading edge of the frontal boundary and along the backside of our high pressure over the Atlantic. So, I had a theory as well the other night when I posted on my Instagram. Somebody had commented on, I forget what it was, my post. I forget what it was. I posted something on TikTok, and somebody commented, GTFO, that's unbelievable. About the tropical storm in the South Atlantic, off the coast of South America. And I said, it's crazy how Mother Nature tends to roll in cycles. It's almost like it cycles through certain events. And I thought to myself, so it's been 20 years since 2004 when we had our actual named hurricane system impact South America. And I thought, and by the way, guys, disclaimer, we have 86 people in here right now. Disclaimer, this is a Weather Center theory. This is not, there's a little bit of, whoa in there, but there's no scientific evidence. There's no real historical data to acknowledge that there are cycles. This is literally just an imaginative theory that I decided to do just a smidge of digging on one late night here a couple days ago, and there is just a little bit of associated with it. So I told myself, we have seen a hurricane off the South America coast back in 2004. And if you guys remember, I keep on saying that 2004, I feel, could be very reminiscent of 2024. And if you guys look at the tracks here, let me make sure you guys can see this okay. Here we go. If you look at the tracks here, I want you to pay close attention to this part of our tracking chart here. So if you watch closely here, let's say, for instance, we go back. So Florida got shmammered in 2004. The Gulf Coast, the Southeast got shmammered in 2004. We had 5 different storms hit Florida. We had a few in the Gulf of Mexico. So yeah. Let's go back to 1984. What stands out to you guys? We had East Coast impacts. We had 3 named storms hit in 1984. But if I were to go to 1985, for example, they missed us. 1985, we got 1 weak impact. If we go to 1986, nothing. They missed us. Let's go to 1964. Look at Florida. You guys, it's a theory, but my inner story writer kind of gets the chills. Every 20 years, we had 5 storms hit Florida in 1964. We had 3 storms hit in 1984. Other seasons in between those increments, nothing really happened. We had 1, or we had maybe a weak 1 or 2, but we didn't have hurricanes on a repetitive basis. And then naturally, if you go back to 2004, as we all know, very similar tracks with a number of storms hitting us. If you go to 2003, look at that. We had one weak system, one very weak system, a tropical depression. If you go back to 2002, again, we had a weak tropical depression. If you go back to 2001, we had nothing. We had a weak tropical depression. If you go back to 1994, we had 1 weak system. That's it. But if you go to 1984 and so on and so forth, and you follow those 20-year increments, notice that all of a sudden the impacts to specifically Florida just naturally go up. And again, this is not grounded in any reality. This is not grounded in science. Maybe there is a small correlation to, the oscillations in the pattern and the way our steering flow is set up. Maybe there is some overarching 20-ish some odd year oscillation of all of our global rotating patterns, our overarching semi-permanent pressure systems, our macro scale steering currents. But I thought, this started as like a weird, what if? And I started looking at things. And I decided I'm going to go every 20 years. Because I remember I joked around as 13-year-old David and said, gosh, we had so many landfalls this year. Now I feel like we're going to have to wait another 20 years for this to happen. And, even last year, guys, if we go to 2022, notice we had Hurricane Ian, and then we had some very weak sauce storms minus Nicole that came through at the last second. Nicole came through at the last second and was our hurricane. But other than that, the only big thing that happened in 2022 was Ian. So even then, you can't really, it's kind of apples to oranges. So, it's very bizarre. If you go to 2021, look at that. Florida came out almost unscathed. We had 2 weak systems into the panhandle. You go back to 2020, the big year. Florida just about came out unscathed. We had some weak sauce systems hit along the south, tropical depressions, and then everything else was concentrated to the Gulf of Mexico. This was a chaotic year. Every time I go back to 2020, though, guys, this is ridiculous. All the spaghetti on these charts. When was it? 2017 was when we had... No, it was 2018 we had Michael. 2018 was Michael. See, it's weird. It's like there's a biasing. Every 20 years, there's a biasing that brings storms in closer to the peninsula. And then every other year in between, it seems like they're either panhandle or scraping the East Coast. There's no direct, stab wounds to the state of Florida. We can keep going, too. 2017, nothing. We had one. 2016, panhandle, see? We'll go back to 2015. Nothing. Nothing at all. No landfalls. 2014, nothing. No landfalls. 2013, nothing. One. Panhandle. 2012, when I left for the military, we had panhandle again. 2011. And I'm going through quick, guys. Nothing. 2010, nothing. 2009, nothing. 2008, one. 2007, one. 2006, 1. 2005, this was the southern storms. We had Katrina, Rita, and Wilma. Very southern periphery, but again, look how we had the Panhandle and the Gulf Coast biasing, and then you go to 2004, Florida got lit up. See, there could be something hidden in meteorological records that suggest that there's something weird that's going on here. In 2000, we had Panhandle again. Let's go to 1999. Nothing. South Florida. 1998. Nothing. Panhandle. 1997. Nothing at all. Maybe one weak Panhandle storm it looked like, or if not, an Alabama landfall. Nothing. Big Bend. 1995. Panhandle. Or actually, 1995, we did have a couple storms, it looks like. 1995 hurricane season, we had 2 East Coast impacts very close to the same Vero Beach, southern Brevard County area as Francis and Jean in 2004. Let's go to 1994. Now, we already looked at 1994. Let's go to 1993. Nothing. Nothing out there for Florida. 1992, nothing. 1991, we had 1 storm. 1990, nothing. 1. 1989, nothing at all. 1998, 1 storm. 1990 or 1987, 1 storm, and then 1 died, it looks like, over Central Florida. That's interesting. 1985, nothing. We got missed. We bobbed and weaved through all of them. And then 1984, you get into 1984, and all of a sudden the bullseye is on our back. Look at how they all just kind of converge here. See, so there's something out there that would prove that every 20-ish or so years, there's a shift in everything globally that just so happens to align and give Florida an increase in landfalls. And I know for a lot of folks who may be watching right now, I'm probably wasting you guys' time just clicking through random charts. But again, it was a very preliminary look, and I was astonished that even my first glance, I'm like, okay, let's just, how goes it? Let's check 1984. And then all of a sudden, whoa, I did not expect that. 1964, whoa, I did not expect that. So it's strange. Every 20 years, if I were to try to root this into reality, you could very, very, very loosely argue that this upcoming hurricane season, Florida could get 3 impacts. You could very loosely argue that Florida is going to get 3 impacts this year, 3 systems. And I'm saying very, very loosely. There's no science in this. It could be entirely coincidental, although I think every 20 years doesn't sound very coincidental, but you never know. You never know. Pete, welcome in, sir. Doing all right, buddy. How about you, sir? Good to hear from you. No worries. Caught the back end. I do truthfully have a gut feeling, Silver Steel, yes. My gut tells me we're going to have one big one. We're going to have one big one in Florida this year, especially if we stay in a weaker La Nina, maybe more of a neutral pattern. I do think Florida is going to get hit. Central Florida as well. I do think Central Florida. If I'm wrong, I'm willing to take that on the chin, but my gut tells me that last year we missed it. Last year we had 1 storm. We had Idalia, and that was it. But if you go just based on history, I don't know. history does say, technically, historically, every 20 years, Florida has suddenly put a bullseye on its back. And if you look, and it's interesting too, because if you look in between those years from 64, 84, 04, and now 2024, it's very interesting because Florida does have an uptick in landfalls each year, but I'm talking like the heart of the peninsula. You know, the panhandle is always at risk because you got stuff sneaking into the Gulf. You could have some homegrown systems. You got some East Coast riders. You know, I can think of Aaron Gilbert Floyd back in the day who came up the East Coast. Everyone panicked in Florida and then they shot away. But to see the peninsula get hit by a bunch of systems on both sides, it seems to happen every 20 years. It's very interesting. Hurricane David in 1950. Oh, 1950 season. I thought you said Hurricane David in 1950. Oh, yeah, look at that. In 1950, 1, 2, and then a panhandle hit or a Big Bend hit. Wow, look at that. That's an interesting track. Hurricane King. So it goes to show, guys, anything is possible. Because this is what a lot of people were predicting was going to happen at the end of 2023. They were going to form down here and then shoot up and out. But look at that. Florida somehow got stabbed right through the center of the state back in 1950 by Hurricane King. Kind of deviated the odds. That's very interesting. (1924) hurricane season. I'm surprised we have archives from back in 1924. I wonder if this is legit or not. So yeah, anyways, before we round out the live stream, we're going to go ahead and start getting ready to close out. I'm going to zoom myself in so I can talk to you guys. All this theorizing and whatnot stuff that's, we're doing right now in the chat, I have noticed a very concerning trend from a lot of other big weather sources out there that are starting to really push tropics. Mike's weather page was very against talking the tropics. Now all of a sudden, everything he talks about has a tropical segment in it. AccuWeather is doing a bunch of talk on the tropics. The Weather Channel's putting out a bunch of stuff on the tropics. X, the old Twitter, is ablaze with tropics. Everybody has suddenly shifted gears and are now talking tropics, even if folks were mentioning, it's too early. And the sad thing is, and I'll leave you guys on this note, and I would hope that everybody in this chat, everybody in the Weather Center community can help to try to populate the right information. And I'm not saying talk to me specifically, but just the reliable sources. The reliable sources. There's a lot of wonderful meteorologists out there. Pete, an excellent example, a ton of experience in the National Weather Service in the meteorological career field. I'm slowly but surely getting up there. We have other well-named, accoladed meteorologists, Tom Terry, Brian Shields. We got folks out there in X. We have James Spann out in Alabama. Folks have been doing it for a long time. Jim Cantori, all the hurricane specialists in the Weather Channel. There's a lot of folks out there who are putting out extra tidbits and discussions on the hurricane season because I bet you 10 to 1 they're also starting to pick up on the trends that a lot of us have been hypothetically scrutinizing since the end of last tropical season because we had nothing better to talk about. And the part that really breaks my heart is the fact that all the hype has discouraged the general population. They're turning the weather off. And they're getting upset at the first chance they get. And I'm standing my ground on social media. I'm starting to comment on people. I'm starting to tell people off professionally on social media. All the people who want to tell the actual degreed folks. I even told a gentleman earlier, I don't know how close we are in the stream still, but I even told a guy, I commented on the Weather Channel. I think it was either the Weather Channel or AccuWeather. I'd mentioned it's all fun and games and it's all hype until your neighborhood gets knocked out. And the guy replied to my comment saying, all you weathermen know nothing better to do besides fearmonger, or all you weather people have nothing better to do, or you guys are best at scaring people. And I said, yes, you're absolutely right. All the weather forecasters out there are excellent at promoting sensationalism, promoting stuff to get them the views, promoting the stuff to get them the notoriety, promoting them to get them the accolades, to get them known, to get them the clout. Actual seasoned meteorologists are never one to promote fear. They never start a headline with fear. Never. And if you've watched weather long enough, you know that the accoladed, the credentialed meteorologists who've been in the game probably longer than I've been on this earth at this point never promote fear. They promote science, they promote the reality of it, and they provide some really good weather bedside manner. During Hurricane Ian, wonderful example. Every big-name meteorologist out there was trying to communicate, you need to evacuate, you need to prepare, you need to get out of harm's way. But they also went on to mention, we will be here to keep you covered and provide you with as much information as we can. No, every other channel out there, every other source who doesn't know butt from elbow just completely tells you, look out, and they just leave you with that. And that's how you can tell the difference between the two. If you can always tell the difference between a seasoned Met who knows what they're talking about and cares about their viewers between someone who is just going for clicks. And I'm putting it out there right now because I've been in a very putting the gloves on, fighting people who are getting upset at the folks who have wanting to combat all the meteorologists out there. They even AccuWeather ended their live discussion with, this is not a scare tactic. This is not anything to be afraid of. We just want you guys to be aware and to prepare, and we'll definitely keep you updated. Beautiful. I don't know why everyone's so upset. It's when you stop, it's when you let your guard down entirely that sneak, that uppercut comes in and knock you out. So it's a shame because I attribute it to all the people who were going crazy who blew their you-know-what too early last year. Hyping everything left and right. There were a few other folks out there who I will admit, they definitely were reliable sources to me at first, and then there were a few moments where I was like, okay, come on, now you're falling victim to the sensationalism as well. Like, let's back it down. You were doing great, and now you're getting up there. You're getting up there. And it scares me because you can't ignore the writing on the wall. We don't know what's going to happen during the hurricane season. Everybody yelling at us is right. Everybody out there has every right to be pissed if you hear someone forecasting, New Orleans, look out, Orlando, incoming. We don't know that. We don't know that. But the science is sound. Record water, protection from El Nino is going to be gone, and we don't know what the Saharan dust is going to do. I even saw somebody on a Facebook page that I'm a part of who actually wrote, this is hype. There are so many other things that go into forecasting hurricanes like OHC, Saharan dust, moisture, hot water, and El Nino or wind shear. And I replied to him and said, okay, well, we're losing the wind shear. We got the hot water. We have great OHC, and we got plenty of moisture. Now the last thing in the puzzle is the dry air. We don't know that just yet. Could probably start forecasting as early as April and May, but even then, it's still up in the air. So I don't know, but all right, everybody. We're going to start calling the chat. I do see some people bouncing out. Wonderful discussion tonight, everybody. We've covered our bases for next week and potentially the week after that with some major storm systems impacting United States, North America to its entirety. We have some Canadian provinces that are going to be under the gun for some significant snowfall, possible severe weather. You never know. Canada is prone to severe weather, and with these next systems beginning to transition as far up to the north as they are in our pseudo-springtime pattern, could possibly start seeing some more severe weather occurrences into parts of Ontario. I was going to say Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, and etc. So, we're definitely keeping an eye on everybody. I'm trying to keep an eye on everybody. We're probably going to have to start shifting gears down to the Caribbean once again, too, as we start to see a lot of moisture beginning to sneak in down there, which is another telltale sign that it's very possible our Climo models are right, because every climate model I've monitored from December, January through February has mentioned that as we go through February and especially March, and then finally in April, we're going to get away from the drier than usual and start to get back to normal moisture, and then it's really going to pick up towards the end of April and into May. And so far, that is kind of verifying. I'm noticing all of our models as you get into March, I'm seeing more and more green and whatnot popping up down there in the Caribbean. So a small piece of the verification puzzle has come true. But thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for everybody who joined us tonight. I do apologize if it seemed a little sensationalist going through my theories and whatnot, but it was just a how goes it, just something I discovered, and I thought it was very interesting. I thought I would share it with you guys. Again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, the disclaimer, not grounded in reality or any kind of science. It was just a little bit of an incremental trend I decided to look at, and I discovered a little bit more to it than I thought I would. I thought as soon as I looked at 1984 or whatever the heck I wanted to put on the table, it would be busted wide open, but a little bit of a trend, so perhaps there's other things we could look at in historical climate patterns that might suggest what has put Florida under the gun for more impacts, and particularly Georgia, Alabama, and the Panhandle, because it does seem like, they're consolidated a little bit more. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop me a comment in the comment section below. I will definitely make it a point to get back to you, even if I am in a bit of a more exhausted or lackluster mental state. I promise I'll get back to you one way or another. You will not just be completely ignored. I can guarantee that. Or drop me a message on my Instagram, my TikTok, or my X. I'll happily get back to you on there as well. Be a little bit easier as well, since it'll be a private message as opposed to a comment. But yeah, anyways, that's all she wrote, folks. Hopefully, once I get through this military weekend, my first drill weekend, I'll be back on my regular operating schedule, and I can start making full-fledged segments. Tomorrow morning is not looking like we're going to have a video made, because I got to be out of the house. I got to get my hair cut. I got to start cleaning myself up, getting my things packed for the weekend, getting all my paperwork and whatnot. So tomorrow is kind of not looking like a Weather Center day, unfortunately. I will still be updating you guys on Instagram and TikTok. Might try to put something out on X. We'll see. And we'll see you again very soon, guys. Hopefully I can see you this weekend, one evening after one of my drill days. To be determined. I'll keep you guys updated, but you've been a wonderful crowd as always. Thank you again to the folks who donated the $20 and the $10 earlier in the chat. It means the world to me, and it goes right back into the channel, of course, or other things or other means that help to upgrade the channel. So I do sincerely appreciate that, and I'll definitely keep you posted on whether or not I get moving on a podcast. If you guys want to drop suggestions or ideas into the comments or in a future chat or on my other social medias, I'm more than welcome to hear them. I'd love to hear them. I'd love to collaborate with you guys and come up with some good ideas that you think will be fresh, innovative, and I'll get back to you on the podcast as well. We'll try to roll that out sometime in a late March, April, maybe as we get closer to the tropics as well. We'll see, but lots to be determined, lots that I need to nail down and get myself under control so this way I can get back to providing for you guys. Because dang, it's been chaotic. Schedule's been so doing my best though, and I love talking to each and every one of you guys. Kevin, thank you very much. Much love as well. Silver Steel, I appreciate it. Kevin Rivera, the Weather Podcast, or the Weathercast for the podcast. I really did like that idea. I think I'm going to try to run with that or kind of amalgamate it into something even more vibrant and exciting. We'll see. We'll see. We definitely got some good ideas coming for later this year, and especially just in time for the tropics, alongside our future chases and other things I want to bring to the channel for you guys. Maybe even a build update on our future chase vehicle as well. I'm still working on that. It's slowly coming together. But thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday Eve once again, and happy early Friday if I don't get to talk to you guys tomorrow. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend if I can't get to speak to you until Saturday or Sunday. Until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.